Let's assume that you inherit a situation where American bombs are being used inside of Russia. Let's assume that you inherit that. We could wind up with World War III if we're not there already and it just hasn't been labeled yet.
We've never been so close to World War III as we are right now.
There could be 100,000 or more potential terrorists on American soil right now today, given what's happened at the southern border.
Correct.
And we do have Venezuela, Congo, others that are emptying their prisons of their most dangerous criminals with one caveat: we'll let you out, but you go to the United States.
I believe every country is doing it.
Yeah. And it's,
by the way, if you were the head of a country,
well,
you'd be the first one to do it. I know you. You'd say, what? Let's get rid of these. You know the money they save and the danger they save?
And look at this map that I did a show about this. The red is where Chinese government has funded buying major farmland.
Yeah.
And then superimposed on that are some of our most strategic military bases. Yeah. And you can see there's Dugway Proving Ground. That's military equipment, biological, chemical weapons. They're surrounding it. Utah Test Training Range, the largest supersonic authorized restricted airspace in the United States. Whiteman Air Force Base, Pt.2 Spirit Stealth Bomber Base, missile drone operations, MQ-9 Reaper, Global Strike Command 3, Air Force entire bomber force, nuclear command, control, and communications. Fort Liberty, Airborne Special Operations Forces, rapid deployment. We've allowed them to come in and buy up agricultural land, wind farms, no wind, no blades on some of the towers, but they're surrounding our military bases. Right. We've allowed that to take place. You may come in and inherit all of this, and it may get worse over the next 5 months.
It will.
What are you going to do about that?
Well, first of all, you mentioned a thing, Fort Liberty. Used to be Fort Bragg. We won world wars from Fort Bragg.
Yes.
And they changed the name. And I don't even want to say that they spent $37 million in doing it, because that's not the most important thing, but that's a lot of money. You know,
it's pretty disgusting.
Now, I will say this. We want to let people come in and invest in our country at the same time.
Of course.
We want them to come and invest. We don't want to make it so impossible. We have to be careful. And this is a lot of land. What disturbs me as much, because we don't want to, say we're not going to let anyone come in and invest. That would be a bad thing. You know, when I was
But they don't need to buy around our...
No, there seems to be a lot of activity around those nuclear sites, to put it mildly. But the thing, when you mention Fort Liberty, I remember that battle. As soon as I got out, they changed it. But they changed many names, almost all of them. They changed the names of these forts where we won 2 world wars and plenty of other things. And there's a great anger about that.
Well, as you know, they call it presentism. What they do is they take today's cultural standards and apply it to people's conduct 100 years ago, as though 100 years ago they were supposed to predict what the standards were going to be 100 years in the future and behave the way things were going to be 100 years in the future. You can't do that. It's like you drive through a neighborhood when the speed limit is 20, then they come and change it to 10 and say, I'm going to give you a retroactive ticket. And that's what they're doing. They're holding these people to the standards of today's mores and folkways based on how they behaved back in that time. It's called presentism. And so they say, oh no, we've got to take these statues down. We've got to change these names because they were behaving in ways that we wouldn't accept today. Well, but it was accepted back then. I'm not saying it's our brightest hour. I'm not saying it's our most shining time. But these people also did great things along with things that we may not be proud of today, but that's who they were at the time.
It is never, if you know these people, because it's a group of people and they don't represent the big majority, okay? They don't represent, but it's never good enough. No matter what you do.
No, I call it tyranny of the fringe.
Yeah, it's never good enough. You could do all the name changes, all of a sudden they'll find that's a problem. So, in different parts of the country.
If you inherit bombs in Russia and you have to deal with Putin, if you inherit terrorists on our soil that could attack our energy grid, How do you deal with that?
I will deal with it, and I'll get the war in Ukraine settled and done by the time I get to office. As president-elect, I will get it done. As president-elect, you have great power. I was able to do great deals from the time I got elected in 2016. I was able to do great deals from the time I got elected to the time I got to office in that little, because you have great power there. You need the power of the presidency to do it. I'm going to get the war in Ukraine. If it's not done by that time, now it looks like it's getting worse. They're taking weapons now where they can shoot deep into Russia. Where is this going? Here's the problem. With Ukraine, which is right next to, we have an ocean in between, they're in for a tiny fraction of what we're in for. And I know them very well because I did it with NATO. I said, you people are delinquent. We're paying almost the entire cost of NATO. So they, excuse the word, they screw us on trade, and then on top of that, we're supposed to defend them. And I said, it doesn't work that way. But I didn't want to do that on my first. I let them know my first. When I came back, I didn't want to do it. I was in office for like 2 weeks. Then I'm saying, but I said, you're not paying your way. And I went back the second time and I said, you have to pay. Hundreds of billions of dollars was paid. They asked me one question, will you defend us against Russia if we haven't paid? I said, absolutely not. As soon as I said that, and I took a lot of heat from the fake news. The fake news went crazy when I said that because I said I won't defend them. Now you have the same thing. They paid hundreds of billions of dollars quickly. And that's where it got all the money to do what they're doing now. But remember this. So we're probably in for $250 billion. They just got $62 billion. And now I heard today that they need more money. It's going to never end. Now, you have some people that say it's not a war that should have ever been started. It would have never started if I was president. Putin would have never done it. First of all, energy went up so much that he makes money on it. When you get up to $100 a barrel, I had it at $40 a barrel, Phil. It's so different. Yeah. But it would have never happened. But now it has happened. Sometimes I hate to say almost that it would never have happened. And Israel would have never happened. The attack on October 7th would have never happened because Iran was broke. And Iran wasn't funding Hamas, and they weren't funding any of the terrorists, Hezbollah, all of them. There's like 28 of them. They had no money. They were broke. I said to China, if you buy oil from Iran, you can't do business in the United States. They didn't want to take any chance of that. Everybody stopped. And we had no terrorist attacks. And I never wanted to talk about it when I was president because I didn't want to jinx it. I wanted to get up and say, we have had no terror. Think of it. During my 4 years, we had no terrorist attacks. This nation is in such danger right now with the people that you're just talking about coming in. And it was interesting because I saw 29,000 Chinese people, and they showed it on camera. They look very strong. They all have their propane stoves. They all have cell phones. They look like military people.
A lot of military-age men have come in.
Yeah, they're mostly men, and they're mostly of a perfect age for military. And it's almost like, what are they doing? Building a military organization within our country with our help? We have people running our country who are grossly incompetent, headed up by a president who should never be there.
How do you unravel that?
Well, you have to do it with people, and we'll do it. I have the same thoughts as you do. A lot of common sense to this stuff. It's not, we talked about it before. Conservative, liberal, I don't care. It's common sense. We need borders. We need low taxes. We need good education. We need a strong military. I rebuilt the entire military. The entire military was rebuilt. I built a wall that was so great. And I got Mexico to give us 28,000 soldiers while I was building the wall to keep people out. We didn't have what you have today. We had the lowest day the week that I left office, and it was a sad day for this country. The week that I left office, that's when we had our lowest illegal flow of immigrants coming into our country. And all Biden had to do is leave it in place. I had a thing called Remain in Mexico. They had a Remain in Mexico. How good is that? They had catch and release in Mexico. It was so stupidly run. And all Biden had to do when he goes to the beach, he's always in the beach, right? He thinks he looks good in the bathing suit. Some advisor said, go to the beach, you look great, Joe. And he can't even lift the chair, which weighs about 6 ounces. Those chairs that you can lift. They're meant for children and old people to lift. So Joe is in the sand, and he's in the beach, and he's totally decimating everything that we built. We built the strongest border in the history of our country, and we're going to do it again. Just one little thing. In 2016, I got elected maybe because of the border. But that border was a fraction. It was nothing compared to what the border is today. And I fixed it. And in 2020 when I ran, I couldn't even talk about it. Nobody wanted to hear about the border because I fixed it. I'll fix it again. But the border today is many, many times worse than it was in 2016.
Well, I've been to the border, and they just straight up say we're using tax dollars to send some of these children that are coming across the border into known prostitution rings, into sweatshops, because we don't have the ability to check. They're just sending them off.
We have 88,000 missing children. Now, can you imagine if that were Trump that had 88,000 missing children? Yeah. 88,000, that's a Holocaust. That's as bad as think of it. These are young, very young children, and also women. They take women, and they trade women. And I had it brought down to the lowest level because I had a border that was actually strong.
And you're going to take it back to that?
Oh, we're going to bring it back, and I think then some. One thing, and you know this better than anybody, that you got to know people. It's about people. If you put a great person at the head of a big agency, lots of good things happen. In my business, if I have a good super in real estate, superintendent, running one of my buildings, and if I move them to another building, sometimes you move them to another building but then that building, you need good people. And we had a lot of great people. I had some that I was very disappointed in. I was some that I was very, very disappointed in. But the one thing is that I was in Washington 17 times in my entire life. I never stayed over. That was reported by the news. I was very rarely there. I wasn't a Washington. I was a New York person. I was a builder in New York, a real estate guy. I had a wonderful company. Everything was going good. It would have been so easy to just to keep doing that. It was probably one of the most successful days of my life was the day before I announced I was running for president. Once you do this, the whole world changes. I even lost Oprah, okay? Oprah liked me so much. And, I haven't spoken to her, I think, since. But she's a good person. Please give her my regards. But, you do things, and my attitude is you have to do what's right. If I didn't think that I won the election by a lot, I would have never run. And I don't think I've ever said this on air before. Maybe I have. But losing the election wouldn't have been that, somebody wins, somebody loses. You go on with your life. But when you lose an election that you won by millions of votes, if I didn't think I won the election, I would have never done it a second time because I would have lost. In other words, I would have lost. I ran because I won the election, and I know that that's what the people want. They want what you and I are talking about right now. They want strong borders, and they want good education. They want all these things that we talked about, and we're going to get it to them, and we're going to get it fast. Probably the hardest problem, the biggest problem is nuclear and the weaponry, and we have to keep out of wars and all of that. But the hardest problem for our country is the millions and millions of people that have been brought into this country, that have been dropped here. Many of them should not be here. They're really, really bad people from the jails, from the places. And you know what's going to happen? You'll take 10 out, and you'll have one where it's a woman with a couple of kids, and you're going to have the news say, oh, look at this, how horrible, how hard. It's a very hard thing to do. But we have to have the largest deportation effort in the history of our country. Dwight Eisenhower had it very early on because he was one that wanted strong borders.
But you're not against immigration.
No, I'm totally for it. But
we need it.
I think we need it desperately. But I don't want their prisoners, and I don't want their people from mental institutions, and I want people to come in legally. I want to let people come in. We need it. We do need it. We need people. But we need good people. We need people that aren't going to blow up our shopping centers and kill people.